Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Mondays with Mundy. And that's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. And as you can see, we're back indoors, which is kind of a shame because it's a beautiful October day outside with bright sun and a nice warm breeze. And we're talking about the outdoors because, as I speak and as you watch and listen, the Union League is building a new rooftop restaurant on the top of the 15th Street section of the clubhouse. That was open and built in 1910. Architect Harstrom Bauer, Union League member. So I figured that since we're kind of outdoors, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about restaurants in general, because what's amazing about the League house itself, since the Broad Street building opened in 1865, is that it is remarkably adaptable architecture. I mean, it's because the buildings change over the years. And as the demands of the clubhouse or the club itself change in terms of the membership, food and beverage operation, a la carte dining, that is restaurant dining, bars, things like that. So the buildings themselves have proved to be remarkably flexible. And again, we're talking about three buildings, don't forget. So we have the Broad Street building, 1865, the 15th Street building at the west end in 1910, and then the middle section, 1911. So I thought we would take a look today at some of the restaurants as they've looked over time and as they've appeared and how they move around the building. And of course, we'll end up on the rooftop after all, because that's how this whole thing got started. So let's start our journey through the clubhouse and look at some of these restaurants. Now, we can't do all of them because that would, my gosh, we'd be here for days, to be honest, because there are that many changes over time. So I thought I would just pick a few for which we have some pretty good photographs and go take our march through time. So here we are. You got it. All right. From the bottom to the top, restaurants at the League. There we go. Now I'm starting with this image, even though it isn't necessarily relevant, because this newspaper article appeared on May the 15th of 1865, and it is the only example we have of the floor plans of the Broad Street building, because regretfully, on September 7th of 1866, there was a fire that pretty much destroyed the third floor of the building. And in that fire, we lost our blueprints, John Fraser's blueprints for the Broad Street building itself. So luckily, this newspaper article appeared, and that's what we have today. So let's zone in on it. So here we see the first and second floors. Unfortunately, we don't have the ground floor or the third floor. But let's walk up the front steps to the Broad Street building. We enter the hall, we go down the hall, and on the left-hand side, we find a dining room. So that was the first a la carte dining room in the League's building, the 1865 clubhouse. And you can see just beneath it or below it is the pantry, because underneath the pantry and the dining room was the kitchen on the ground floor. And they used a dumbwaiter, and as you can see, stairs, to get the food up to the first floor into the dining room itself. And furthermore, if you look at the floor plan on the right-hand side, you'll see that the pantry went all the way up to the second floor to service the banqueting room. But let's go back to the left-hand floor plan, because I want to show you how things change over time. So we have the dining room, and that was fine. And if you look across the hall to the right, you see we have a private dining room. Today, we know that as the Cafe Meredith. And to the right of that, we have the publication room. And today, that is the Wi-Fi Cafe. And if you look beneath it, you see the passage, and then you see office, directors, and reception. All right. Well, those three spaces were all combined in 1886 to create what we call the old cafe today. And that includes both the dining area and the bar space as well. So you can see how architecture from 1865 was remarkably adaptable to the needs as the club was changing over the course of the 19th century. So let's take a look and see what we see. All right, so we go to the ground floor first, since this is bottom to the top. And on the right-hand side, you see those two columns, and they are flanking the staircase that leads from the first floor to the ground floor. So the member would turn to his right, and he would be in what was called the Oyster Cafe. So it was a seafood restaurant, basically. Now keep in mind that there is no front door yet at this space. This is all one large rectangular space, but is now the hallway or the rotunda. And there's no door, so there's a window that gives them some natural daylight. And you can see the windows on the south side of Moravian Street on the left-hand side. It's a nice bright, looks like a nice bright, airy room. And I'm sure it was very pleasant to eat in at the same time. So So that is today's Heritage Center. And where that table is on the right foreground, that is actually the rotunda. All right. Okay. Moving on. First floor, restaurant. So this is the first a la carte dining room in the Broad Street building. And the entrance is to our left because the windows to the right are on Moravian Street. And then in between, we have that wonderful small fireplace, but with that large mirror as the overmantel. And to the left of that, we have the doorway that led into the pantry from which the food would be delivered from the basement kitchen. All right. And look at that, just magnificently stuccoed and stenciled, frescoed ceiling in there. Magnificent stuff. It's a shame it's gone. Let's take a look now. So this is circa 18, let's just about the 1870s, early 1880s. And here we have 1902, and you can see how the room has changed. The fireplace isn't the same. This is now brick, natural mantle on it. Look at that painting over as the overmantle on top of that. You can see the pantry door is gone because food is now coming up from different area. And most noticeably different is the windows. So where two double hung sash windows is now one large bay window on the Moravian Street side, and that bay window is still there. Beautiful wainscoting, by the way, but you can see how the ceiling has changed. Now it's coffered, which means it's wood. And our next photograph is from 1962. So in 1960, the League hired Philadelphia architect Vincent Kling to be the consulting architect to the League House. And one of the first things he did was he took that space and revisioned it as a very modern quick service dining room. That, as you can see, is now serving members in 1962. And the feature of the room, and if you look at the chef on the right-hand side, you can see he's carving a steamship round of beef. And so that was the specialty of that room itself. Very simple, modern architecture, very different from what we just saw in the previous two photographs, but it worked. Today, this is the business center. There you go. Who would have thought? So moving on to the next floor plan, you can see now this dates from 1890. And again, if you walk up the front steps of the Broad Street building and down the hallway on the right-hand side, we have the cafe. So you can see how that room changed. And then behind it, we still have rooms 6, 7, and 9. All right. And 9, of course, is the a la carte dining room and the pantry beneath it. All right, moving on. And actually, by this at this time, room number 6, the original private dining room, is now the ladies' dining room, and 7 had become an office. All right, this is what the old cafe looked like in 1887, just a year after it opened. The room was decorated by Louis Comfort Tiffany and Company. Beautiful maroon red walls with gold leaf stencil patterns, beautiful stuff like that, and that wonderful, what I will call them a frieze on the south wall that runs from left to right between that piece of molding and the cornice in the ceiling itself. And unfortunately, then when the room was redecorated in the early 1960s, we lost that frieze. Apparently, it was painted on paper and the paper disintegrated. So that's the old cafe. And see the table there in the right foreground left? We still have those tables, and some of them are still in the room. How do you like that? And those chairs, we have 4 of them downstairs in the Heritage Center. One armchair and 3 side chairs, just as you see right there. Now this is the room in 1962, after Vincent Kling's firm had redecorated it into what they thought was a more Victorian looking room. Basically, what you're looking at is red flocked wallpaper on the wall, and they had a red wool carpet. The chairs were upholstered in red leather, so it was a very red room. So, but very plain, without all of that fuss that you get sometimes with Victorian rooms. So I wouldn't call it Victorian, but nonetheless, but that's what it looked like in 1960. And this is the room today, after it was redecorated with the rest of the first floor of the Broad Street building in 2005, 2006. So, but you can see how the frieze has been reimagined and run around the entire top of the walls in the room itself. Fireplace is still there. The chairs are still there, reupholstered, and even some of the tables are still there, like off to the right-hand side. So wonderful room. But again, it shows how the room how the space has been adapted over the years to meet current culinary, cultural requirements and needs. And that bar, by the way, it's got to be the best bar in Center City, Philadelphia. It's got everything that's been brewed, fermented, or distilled. Magnificent place to have a drink. So here we go. Next, all right, this is that room off to the right-hand side of the ladies' dining room. This was room number 7 in the floor plan. Then it was known as the Colonial Room, and this is circa, 1902. And you can see how that mirror overmantel is there with that beautiful pediment, so very neoclassical, wainscoting, all right, and the upholstered chairs and that beautiful table. And that door / window on the right-hand side is now in the Cafe Meredith. So what does this room look today? Here we go. It's the Wi-Fi Cafe. You can see how it's been redesigned. Now, this is not as it looks today, but this was I guess one of the earliest or first iteration of the room after it became the Wi-Fi Cafe. So you can see how that beautiful blue glazed tile mantle is still there surrounding the fireplace. We've lost the overmantel. We have portraits instead. And the wainscoting, the barrel vaulted ceiling is still there. It's a magnificent place to eat today. All right. And as you look through the door on the left-hand side, you can look out into the hallway. You can see Sheridan's Ride. All right, let's move on. So here we have a floor plan from roughly 1900, because at this point, this is as far west as the building went. So Broad Street at the bottom, moving towards 15th Street at the top. And here we're looking at this floor plan because we see the new cafe on the left-hand side in the middle of the block, so to speak. So let's take a look at the new cafe. All right. This is it. It was designed and opened in 1893. The architect was another Scottish immigrant architect of Philadelphia, just like John Fraser, but this was Robert Kennedy. And this is his cafe. Now, because there was already a cafe, this would be called the new cafe, and the original cafe would become the old cafe, which it still is to this day. And of course, we know that this space today is occupied by the Founders Room, because this space was demolished to make way for the middle section in 1911. But it's a great looking room, isn't it? Just look at that beautiful clear story. You don't see clear stories anymore. That extension above the ceiling of the room to allow air and light in. And look at those windows on the left-hand side. That is Moravian Street. And that monstrous fireplace in front of us against the west wall. And that hearth is where the Hearth Club first met in the 1890s. So how do you like that? That's the Hearth Club got its name. So that's the cafe of 1893, long gone, unfortunately. And here we have the modern clubhouse of the 21st century. So, and the first floor along the top. So if you look at the Mead and the Grant rooms, that is the 1910 Trumbauer edition. And if you look at Founders and Martin Hammond, that is the middle section, 1911, also Horace Trumbauer. Okay, and that's what we're going to look at next, all 4 spaces. So we're in the middle section, the 1911 section, and it's not clear whether we are in Founders or Martin Hammond, but we are in what were eventually called the North and South Marble rooms. But as you can see, it's one large space. There are no dividers between the hallway and the dining rooms themselves. So it's one large space. And with the hallway running through, obviously it was very noisy and busy. And so in 1913, beautiful plate glass walls were installed with doors that led into the dining rooms. And this is what it looked like. Now, this is 1960, but it's a photograph that shows those plate glass walls without any kind of coverings on them or clocking. So you get a really good sense of what the architecture of those glass walls look like. And they were in there until they were removed to make way for 1862 by Martin Hammond and Founders, which opened in October of 2009. So that's 1960, and this is another view of, this would be the what today we think of, or we knew as the South Marble. So that's Moravian Street off to the left. And then the left-hand corner and the far wall would be the doorway into the Benson room. And this is what the room looks like when it's full of people. Pretty good, great size space. But again, it looks entirely different today. All right, now here is what was known as the Oak Room. So if you walked in the 15th Street door and you turned to your right, the first room on the right would be the Oak Room. Now, when the building opened in 1910, the rooms on both sides of the hallway were pool and billiard rooms. But in 1954, there was a robust economy, membership was expanding, and they needed more space for food and beverage. And so they took the South billiard pool room and turned it into the Oak Room. And it looks like a 1954 room, doesn't it? I actually like it, believe it or not. And again, all that beautiful quarter oak that Trumbauer used gave the room its name. And I also like the way now that magnificent bar, which ran halfway down the wall, was both a bar, that is alcohol, and it was also a seafood bar. So you could get all the fresh seafood there as well. And it was also a service bar to service the restaurant itself. What I like is that in the center row in front of us, you can see how they changed the color of the upholstery on the chairs, that it wasn't all monotonous or monochrome, but rather polychrome. Anyway, neat stuff. And this is what the room looked like, looking from east to west. So those are the 15th Street windows ahead of us. Behind those parterres, which you can I'll call them parterres, but in the left-hand corner, by the way, in the wall facing us is where the cornerstone of the building was laid on October the 9th of 1909. So neat room there. And today, this is, can you guess? This is the mead room. Okay. And here we have Trumbauer's 1910 and 1911 sections. So 1910 facing us in the west end and 1911 in the middle, beautiful Indiana limestone, done in the Beaux-Arts style, which is one of Trumbauer's specialties. But notice especially the roof. So the 5th floor with the mansard roof, as you can see, is recessed behind the balustrade that runs around both of the Trumbauer additions. And that's going to be a benefit because when the League went to the city and first proposed the rooftop dining, they were worried that the dining room might be visible from the ground, from the street, because the building is on the National Register of Historic Places, and therefore its exterior appearance must be preserved as it was when it was built. But because of that setback, there was plenty of room to build the restaurant without it being seen from the street. So worked out all right. Little, I'm sure Trumbauer had no idea what he was planning at that point, but it worked. And this is what it looks like today. In the center, you can see that the dark rectangular space is actually a light well, and that allowed fresh air and light to go down into the interior rooms, the sleeping rooms, and provide them, as I said, fresh air and light. All right, but that will be covered over. And this is the artist rendering of what the dining room would look like. Magnificent, isn't it? And it looks like it was meant to be there all along, right? Because the exterior facade just matches the limestone facade that Trumbauer had in 1910. And you can see there's outdoor dining, there's indoor dining, and when the weather is nice, the indoor dining will become outdoor dining because they can open the doors and windows. Pretty neat. Okay, and of course now we're looking at the 15th Street elevation is what we see in front of us, and so that makes Sansom Street off to the left and Moravian Street off to the right. And these are the north and south elevations. So this is what the profile of the restaurant will look like from both the north and the south. All right, you can see how it fits on top of the roof. Here we have the floor plan. So 15th Street on the left, you can see the outdoor patio, if that's what they'll call it. And again, in good weather, those partitions will open up to allow even more outdoor dining, so to speak. But you can see that bar in the center, lots of seats around it, which is always a good thing for a bar. Banquettes at the bottom, tables all the way around. And I believe that the restaurant, when finished, will seat approximately 60 to 80 people. We'll see how well it does. But in the rest of the space, you can see this restaurant has to be self-sustaining because you're 6 floors above the kitchen on the ground floor of the middle section. So this restaurant has to work by itself, all by itself. And so it has the kitchen, it has pantries, refrigerators, dishwashing equipment. I mean, everything it needs to be a functioning restaurant. And that's what you see there in that diagram. So pretty neat stuff. Great planning, gotta admit. These are just renderings or imaginations, if you will, of what the space will look like. And it's great stuff. I mean, there will be nothing else like this in Center City once this opens in November of 2023. It'll just be spectacular. There's the bar. And look at this. Can you imagine sitting out there on a beautiful, even a fall night when it's still warm and the lights in the city come on and the stars come out. It's going to be the single best place to get a drink in Center City, Philadelphia, with that view. Look at it. It is just fantastic. So all good stuff. And this is what the construction project actually looks like. So they've begun working on it. You can see the light well there in the center, popping through, so to speak. And so construction has begun. And it is expected that it will go on until November of 2023, when everything will be ready for the grand opening. So we'll see if that works or not. So everybody, just salivate while you're waiting for this space to be open, because it's going to be incredible. So there we go. From the bottom to the top, a brief history, shall we say, a brief journey through the restaurants at the Union League from 1865 to 2023 eventually. So thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this little walk through the League's house. And we hope to see you in 2 more weeks. So in the meantime, everybody stay well, stay healthy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you then. Bye now.